Every day, motorcyclists squeeze through traffic, dodging gridlock and sometimes disaster, while drivers argue whether this is clever survival or just a reckless gamble. In California, it is legal. Elsewhere, it is banned. The official line says lane splitting can make roads safer, yet helmet camera footage captures heart-stopping near misses and catastrophic crashes just seconds apart. So why are governments, experts, and riders still fiercely divided? And how do the hidden mechanics of speed, visibility, and law twist the odds in ways most drivers never realize? The rules and the risks aren't what you think. Lane splitting, lane filtering, and lane sharing are three terms often used interchangeably, yet each carries a specific meaning in the world of motorcycles. Lane splitting is the act of riding a motorcycle between lanes or rows of vehicles moving in the same direction, usually in traffic that is either stopped or crawling forward. This is the maneuver most people picture when they see a motorcyclist glide between lines of cars on a congested freeway. Lane filtering, by contrast, refers to moving between stopped vehicles only when traffic has come to a complete halt, most commonly at red lights or heavy intersections. Filtering is often permitted only at low speeds and only when cars are not moving. In places like New South Wales and Victoria in Australia, the law spells out that filtering is allowed at speeds below 30 km/h and only when it is safe to do so. Lane sharing describes two motorcycles traveling side by side in the same lane, maintaining parallel positions as they move with the flow of traffic. In many states and countries, lane sharing is legal, provided both riders agree to it. The distinction is important because lane sharing involves only motorcycles, while lane splitting and filtering both mean a motorcycle is passing between other types of vehicles, usually cars or trucks. Traffic codes around the world use these terms to draw clear boundaries. California's Vehicle Code Section 21658.1 uses the phrase lane splitting to define the act of riding between rows of moving or stopped vehicles. Utah's code, on the other hand, defines lane filtering and restricts it to situations where traffic is completely stopped and the road speed limit is 45 mph or less. European regulations, such as those in France and UK, tend to use the term filtering, though the practice itself often blurs into lane splitting as traffic begins to move. Getting these definitions right matters. Whether a maneuver is permitted or forbidden can hinge on a single word in a statute. For riders and drivers alike, understanding the difference between splitting, filtering, and sharing is the first step to making sense of the rules and the arguments surrounding motorcycles in traffic. Across the world, the rules for lane splitting are anything but uniform. In California, Assembly Bill 51 made headlines in 2016 by officially legalizing the practice. The law defines lane splitting as riding a motorcycle between rows of stopped or moving vehicles in the same direction, and it places the state in a category of its own within the United States. The California Highway Patrol offers guidance, advising riders to split only when traffic is moving at 30 mph or less, and to keep their speed no more than 10 mph above surrounding vehicles. While California sets out clear boundaries, most other states in the United States take the opposite approach. More than 30 states explicitly ban lane splitting, and in many others the law is silent, leaving the decision to local enforcement, which often means a de facto prohibition. Australia draws a sharper line between lane splitting and filtering. In New South Wales and Victoria, lane filtering is legal under strict conditions. The motorcycle must not exceed 30 km/h, and filtering is only allowed when traffic is stationary or moving very slowly. Riders are barred from filtering near heavy vehicles, buses, or in school zones. These rules were shaped by research and public safety campaigns, aiming to limit the maneuver to congestion and reduce risk. European countries present a patchwork of both tradition and law. France and Italy have long tolerated lane splitting. Recent regulations in Paris formally recognize the practice provided riders keep speeds low and exercise caution. The United Kingdom allows filtering, and British road codes even suggest that drivers should anticipate motorcycles moving between lanes in heavy traffic. Enforcement, however, can vary from city to city. In Germany, lane splitting remains illegal, and fines are regularly issued to riders caught between lanes. Elsewhere, the landscape is even more fragmented. In Taiwan, motorcycles under 250 cubic centimeters can filter in certain conditions, while larger bikes face tighter restrictions. The Philippines debates the issue regularly, with proposed bans and inconsistent enforcement. Each jurisdiction crafts its own rules, shaped by local traffic patterns, culture, and public opinion. For riders and drivers alike, the legality of lane splitting is determined as much by geography as by statute, setting the stage for sharp contrasts in safety data and public attitudes. Motorcycle advocates often point to a set of practical advantages when defending lane splitting. For daily commuters, the logic is straightforward. Motorcycles take up less space than cars, and when allowed to pass between lanes, they help relieve pressure on already crowded roads. Urban transport models from cities like Paris and Melbourne have shown that even a modest number of motorcycles moving freely through congestion can smooth the overall flow, easing bottlenecks for everyone. Instead of idling in traffic, riders advance, and the space they leave behind allows cars to inch forward, a ripple effect in gridlocked commutes. Jake, a seasoned commuter and riding instructor, puts it simply: filtering through traffic is not just about speed, it is about not being a sitting duck. For him and many others, lane splitting is not a shortcut, it is a survival tactic. Stuck in bumper-to-bumper traffic, a motorcyclist becomes vulnerable, sandwiched between vehicles with little room to react. By moving forward between lanes, riders gain an escape route, reducing the risk of being rear-ended by distracted drivers. This is not just theory. Helmet camera footage routinely captures moments where a quick maneuver between cars prevents a collision that would have been unavoidable in a stationary lane. There is also an environmental angle. With fewer motorcycles idling in jams, emissions drop. Shorter commute times mean engines run less, and studies from Australia and California suggest that widespread lane splitting could translate into measurable cuts in urban air pollution. The effect may be small in the grand scheme, but every minute shaved off a journey, multiplied across thousands of riders, adds up. Riders also highlight the unique spatial efficiency of motorcycles. Where a car requires a full lane, a motorcycle can make use of the narrow gap between vehicles, space that would otherwise go unused. In cities where traffic density is high and road expansion is not an option, this efficiency becomes a valuable asset. Transport planners in Europe and Australia have factored this into their congestion models, finding that even a slight increase in lane-splitting motorcycles can lead to smoother traffic patterns overall. For many, the core appeal of lane splitting is about reclaiming autonomy and safety in an environment built for larger vehicles. The ability to keep moving, avoid the heat of exhaust fumes, and stay out of harm's way resonates with riders facing long commutes or unpredictable traffic. Jake sums up the sentiment. It is not about breaking rules, it is about making the road work for everyone, not just the biggest vehicles. While these perceived benefits drive support among riders and some policymakers, they also set the stage for a more complicated discussion about the real-world risks and the limits of safety. The promise of efficiency and protection is powerful, but it is only one side of a story that continues to divide experts and everyday drivers alike. A sudden swerve, a flash of color in the side mirror, and the space between two cars closes without warning. For all the promise of lane splitting, the road can turn hostile in an instant. The very gaps that offer escape can become traps when conditions change. On a busy freeway, a motorcyclist threads between lanes at 20 miles per hour above crawling traffic. A car drifts left, the rider reacts, but the margin is razor thin. The kinetic energy at play multiplies with every mile per hour of speed difference. Physics does not negotiate, and a side impact at high speed delivers force far beyond what helmets or protective gear can absorb. The danger is not always visible. Many drivers focused on the vehicles ahead simply do not expect a motorcycle to appear in their blind spot. Decades of human factors research show that even attentive drivers can miss what is not anticipated. Inattentional blindness, the tendency to overlook unexpected objects, means a rider can be hidden in plain sight. Studies using eye tracking and simulators confirm that motorcycles are less likely to be noticed than cars, especially when approaching from behind or weaving between lanes. The result is a phenomenon known as the looked but failed to see error. A driver checks the mirror, glances over the shoulder, and still does not register the motorcycle closing in. Proximity to large vehicles adds another layer of risk. Trucks and buses create wide blind spots and unpredictable air currents. The space between lanes narrows, and the margin for error shrinks. A slight miscalculation by rider or driver can mean contact with a moving wall of steel. Field studies reveal that most lane-splitting collisions with large vehicles occur not because of reckless intent, but because the available escape route disappears at the wrong moment. Speed differential is the critical threshold. Research from California and Australia draws a clear line. When the difference between motorcycle speed and surrounding traffic exceeds 15 miles per hour, the risk of a crash rises sharply. Above this point, the time available for either party to react drops below the limits of human reflex. A car changing lanes at the last second, a rider accelerating to beat a jam, split-second decisions become irreversible. Helmet cam footage from real-world crashes brings these dangers into sharp relief. In one widely shared clip, a rider splitting lanes at freeway speeds collides with a car that veers unexpectedly. The impact is violent, the result immediate. Experts point out that at higher velocities, the energy involved outpaces the protection offered by even the best gear. Visibility failures, speed differentials, and the unpredictable behavior of other drivers combine to make lane splitting a maneuver that demands constant vigilance. The hazards are not theoretical, they unfold daily on city streets and highways. The line between benefit and danger is defined not just by law, but by physics, perception, and the narrowest fractions of a second. The debate over lane splitting has played out in research labs, on city streets, and in government offices, but the numbers themselves rarely line up as neatly as advocates or critics might hope. In Victoria, Australia, the Monash University Accident Research Centre, MUARC, tracked crash data before and after the state legalized lane filtering at low speeds. Their findings were clear. Once filtering was permitted for motorcycles traveling at 30 kilometers per hour or less, rear-end collisions involving motorcyclists dropped by nearly a third. Dr. Stuart Newstead, who led the MUARC evaluation, put it plainly, lane filtering can reduce injury risk if practiced within specified speed limits and contexts. Across the Pacific, California's approach drew on a different set of evidence. The California Highway Patrol, working with UC Berkeley's SafeTrack, reviewed thousands of collision reports after the state formally legalized lane splitting in 2016. The CHP's guidance is specific. Motorcyclists should split only when traffic is moving at 30 miles per hour or less, and never more than 10 miles per hour faster than surrounding vehicles. Their analysis found that when riders adhered to these limits, injury severity and crashes was lower than for other motorcycle collisions. A spokesperson for the CHP summarized the agency's stance. The risk in California lane splitting comes not from the act itself, but from doing it too fast, in the wrong place, or without visibility. Looking for a national pattern, researchers turned to the United States' largest crash datasets. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration's Fatality Analysis Reporting System, FARS, catalogs every fatal crash on American roads, but there is a problem. Most reports do not record whether a motorcycle was lane splitting at the time of a crash. Without this key detail, national statistics cannot reliably answer whether lane splitting is safer or riskier overall. This coding gap leaves researchers and policymakers with an incomplete picture, unable to draw direct comparisons between states or spot trends hidden in the numbers. The result is a patchwork of evidence. MUARC's Australian studies show clear benefits in controlled, low-speed conditions. California's collision data points to reduced injury severity when strict speed guidelines are followed. Nationally, the absence of standardized data clouds the debate. Each expert, from Dr. Newstead in Melbourne to the CHP's crash analysts in Sacramento, agrees on one thing. Context and careful limits matter more than blanket rules. The numbers tell different stories, but the call for precision, both in writing and in research, remains constant. A speedometer needle hovers at 15 miles per hour above the traffic flow. That is the threshold, where the numbers shift from manageable risk to sharply rising danger. Crash records from California and Victoria, paired with biomechanical analysis, reveal a clear pattern. When the speed gap between a motorcycle and surrounding vehicles stays at or below 15 miles per hour, both injury rates and crash severity remain low. But as soon as that difference climbs, the odds change. The risk curve steepens and the consequences escalate. Physics explains why. The energy in a collision does not just rise with speed, it multiplies with the square of the difference. A gentle nudge at 5 miles per hour over traffic might leave a scratch. At 20 miles per hour over, the same impact can break bones. Human reaction time sets another boundary. As the speed gap widens, the time for a rider or driver to see, decide, and act can shrink to less than a second. That is too little to avoid a sudden lane change or an unexpected stop. The evidence points to a set of rules, simple but grounded in data. Split lanes only when traffic moves at 50 miles per hour or less, and never exceed a 15 mile per hour speed gap. The safest outcomes appear when the difference is 10 miles per hour or less. Use high visibility gear and daytime headlights. Riders in bright helmets and jackets are seen sooner, even in dense traffic. Stay away from trucks, buses, and vehicles with large blind spots. Most serious sideswipes happen with these vehicles. The space between the first two lanes from the median is typically wider and offers better escape routes. Watch for subtle signs, wheels turning, brake lights flickering, drivers checking mirrors. These are the earliest warnings of a possible move. Never split at intersections or where lanes narrow sharply. The margin for error disappears. Practice slow speed maneuvers often. The best riders can stop, swerve, or adjust their line instantly. For drivers, the checklist is just as clear. Check mirrors and blind spots before every lane change, signal early, and expect a motorcycle, especially in heavy traffic. Leave extra space between lanes and stay alert to lane splitting. Every guideline here is rooted in crash investigation and field data, reflecting the real limits of energy, perception, and human response. Right now, 30 million motorcycles share global roads, and lane splitting remains legal or tolerated in key regions like California, France, and Australia. As cities grow denser and traffic intensifies, the debate shifts from personal choice to public policy. Every new study shapes tomorrow's laws, and every ride demands a new calculation. The next decision and its consequences may be closer than you think. Share your thoughts below.